You're at the top of your backswing. Everything feels right. Then your hands take over, the club drops in from the outside, and the ball sails dead right into the trees. Again. You blame your grip. You blame the driver. You blame your age. Here is the truth I paid years to learn. The slice, the fat shots, the power you know is in there but can never find on command. None of it lives in your hands, or your expensive new club. It lives in the first split second of your downswing. And the move that fixes it was written down more than 60 years ago, then quietly buried under 100 useless tips that keep you paying and never fix a thing. I'm going to hand you a method from a book published in 1962 that most golfers have never heard of, backed by force plate research from a laboratory in Britain. No lessons, no launch monitor, no $500 driver, just your body and the club already sitting in your garage. And if you think this is only for low handicappers or young athletes, stay with me, because it works best for the stiff, the slow, and the weekend player who only gets out twice a month. I still remember standing on a driving range one cold October evening, a $600 driver in my hands, watching every single ball curve into the next fairway over, and finally understanding that the club was never the problem. I was. And worse, somebody had been counting on me, never figuring out why. Let me tell you what that ignorance actually cost me, because I think it's costing you too right now, and you don't even feel it. I started golfing seriously in my 40s. I did everything the magazines and the pros told me. I bought the game improvement irons for around $900. I bought 2 new drivers in 3 years, because each one promised to correct my slice for another $500 apiece. I took lessons at $60 a session, and I took a lot of them. I bought the training grip, the swing plane trainer, the weighted club, the alignment sticks, the impact bag. If it promised to add 20 yards or straighten out my ball flight, I owned it. And here's the part that still stings. My slice never left. Not really. I'd fix it for 1 bucket of balls, feel like a genius, then show up the next Saturday and watch it come right back like it never left. I told myself I just needed more practice. I told myself I needed the newer model. I told myself it was my flexibility, my back, my age. What I never once questioned was whether the advice itself was the problem. Because here is what nobody selling me anything wanted me to notice. Every one of those products, every one of those lessons, was aimed at the wrong end of the swing. They were fixing my grip, my stance, my takeaway, my follow-through, everything except the one moment that actually decides where the ball goes. And that's not an accident. There is no repeat customer like a golfer who almost gets it. A man who fixes his swing forever buys 1 driver and keeps it 10 years. A man who slices forever buys a new driver every 18 months, chasing the fix. Guess which customer the whole industry is built around? I did the math one winter, and it made me sick. Between clubs, lessons, gadgets, range fees, and lost balls, I had spent well over $4,000 in about 4 years, and my handicap had barely moved. $4,000 to stay exactly the same. That's not a hobby. That's a subscription to your own frustration. But the money was only half of it. The real loss was the golf itself. The rounds where I stopped keeping score by the 9th hole. The buddies who stopped inviting me because I held up the group hunting for balls in the woods. The quiet embarrassment of being the guy who apologizes on every tee box. That's the loss you can't put a number on, and it was piling up every single week I didn't understand the truth. So let me tell you where the truth actually came from, because it did not come from any pro shop. In 1968, something remarkable happened, and almost no everyday golfer has ever heard about it. The Golf Society of Great Britain commissioned a team of scientists to answer one question once and for all. What actually happens in a golf swing? Not opinions, not feelings. Measurements. The result was a book called The Search for the Perfect Swing, written by Alistair Cochrane and John Stobbs. They wired golfers up, they used strobe photography, they used force plates buried in the ground, and they measured what the body really does when a club meets a ball. And what they found flipped everything I had been taught upside down. The golf swing is not powered by the arms and hands. It is powered from the ground up, in a specific order, like a whip cracking. The feet push against the ground first, then the hips turn, then the torso, then the shoulders, the arms, and last of all the club. When that order is right, the club head comes screaming through impact, with speed you didn't know you had. When that order is wrong, when the hands and shoulders fire first, which is exactly what feels natural, you get the over-the-top move that causes the slice. Every slice, nearly all of them come from the same broken sequence. Think about what that means for a second. The scientists proved, with instruments, in the late 1960s, that the slice is a timing and sequence problem, not a grip problem and not an equipment problem. That research has existed for more than half a century, and yet how many times were you told to strengthen your grip, or roll your wrists, or buy an offset driver? All of that treats the symptom while ignoring the disease that the science had already identified. Here's the uncomfortable part. Those scientists also found that trying harder makes it worse. When you swing with all your might using your arms and shoulders, you actually fire the sequence in reverse. The big muscles up top overpower the small, quick muscles that should finish the motion, and the club head slows down at the exact instant it should be speeding up. That's why the harder I swung, the shorter and more crooked my drives got. I was working against physics, and the physics had been written down and sitting in a book since before I was born. But knowing the sequence is right doesn't tell you how to feel it. And this is where it gets interesting. Therefore, this is where the real secret starts to surface. Because 6 years before those British scientists published their study, an American teaching pro had already figured out the practical version of the same truth, and he wrote it in plain language for ordinary golfers. His name was Joe Dante, and in 1962 he published a book called The 4 Magic Moves to Winning Golf. I had never heard of it. Neither had any pro I ever paid, and when I finally read it, I understood why. Dante did not care about your grip theories or your follow-through. He said something almost nobody says out loud. He said the golf swing is really decided in the transition, the exact moment you change direction from backswing to downswing. Get that moment right, he wrote, and the rest of the swing practically takes care of itself. Get it wrong, and nothing else you do can save the shot. He was describing in 1962, in words a weekend golfer could understand, the same ground-up sequence the scientists would prove with force plates 6 years later. And here is the move he described that changed everything for me. Dante said that as you finish your backswing, before your hands have even reached the top, you should already be starting down with your lower body. Not your arms, your lower body. He described a slight shift and turn toward the target that begins while the club is still going back the other way. For a split second, the top of your club is still moving away from the target while your hips are already moving toward it. That stretch, that little counter movement, is what loads the swing like a spring. The first time I read that, I actually laughed because it sounded impossible. How can 2 parts of me move in opposite directions at the same time? But that is exactly the point. That is the move that separates every good ball striker from every frustrated hacker, and it is the move nobody had ever shown me, because it cannot be sold to you in a box. So why did this disappear? Why did I have to dig up a book from 1962 to find something this important? Because it's invisible, and because it's free. You cannot photograph the transition move on a store display. You cannot stamp it on the sole of a driver. A pro cannot charge you for a series of lessons to install a feeling that takes about 10 minutes to understand and a couple of weeks to groove. The entire golf economy runs on visible, sellable fixes. The club, the grip, the gadget, the swing aid. A truth that costs nothing and lives inside your own body is worthless to everyone except you. So it got crowded out, not with one dramatic ban, but with 60 years of louder, shinier, more profitable advice, drowning it out until it practically vanished. And I want you to sit with how much that has cost people like us. A weekend golfer who plays 30 rounds a year for 20 years plays 600 rounds in his golfing life. 600 rounds. If the transition flaw robs you of even 10 strokes a round, and for a slicer it robs far more than that, you have lost thousands of shots to a single misunderstanding that a book solved in 1962. Not to your age, not to your talent, to one missing piece of information that somebody had every reason to keep quiet. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now because I thought it too. You're thinking this sounds like advanced stuff for flexible young players with good backs, and that you're too stiff, too old, or too far gone for a move like this. This next part is built specifically for you, the person who's about ready to click away because you assume your body can't do fancy things anymore. I promise you it can, and I'm going to prove it to you in your own living room, right now, with nothing but a broom or an umbrella. Stand up, take a broom, hold it like a club, and get into your golf posture. Now I want you to forget about the ball, forget about power, forget about everything you've ever been told. Slowly raise the broom into your backswing. And here is the whole secret in one simple feeling. Just before you reach the top, press your lead foot, that's your left foot for a right-handed player, gently down into the floor, like you're squashing a bug or stepping on a gas pedal. That's it. That little press into the ground is what starts your downswing. Not your hands, not your shoulders. A quiet push from the front foot into the floor. Do it slowly, 10 times. Feel how the pressure moving into your lead foot naturally pulls your hips around toward the target, and how the club just falls into place behind you, coming down from the inside instead of over the top. You are not muscling anything. You are letting the ground start the chain. This is the exact sequence those British scientists measured on their force plates in 1968. The feet push first, and it is the exact transition Joe Dante wrote about in 1962. And you just did it in your kitchen without spending a dime. If you can shift your weight from one foot to the other while standing at the sink, you have all the flexibility this requires. This is not an athletic move. It is a timing move. Stiff, older, slower players actually do it better than strong young athletes because they aren't tempted to overpower it with brute arm strength. Your body's limitations are not the obstacle here. The bad information was the obstacle, and you just stepped around it. Now do that broom drill for 2 minutes a day, every day, for 2 weeks, and something quiet and wonderful happens. The move stops being something you think about and becomes something you feel. It sinks below conscious thought, and the first time it shows up on the course without you trying, the first time you feel that push from the ground and watch the ball start left and draw gently back to the middle of the fairway, you will feel a little bit robbed of all the years nobody told you this was the whole game. And that is exactly why I sat down and wrote everything down myself, in plain language, the way Dante did for me. What you are getting in this video is the transition, the one moment that decides your slice. What I could not fit here is the rest of the case-by-case work, the topped fairway wood diagnosed from start to finish, hips that actually rotate on command, weight transfer and low point control, club face control, and what to do on the day your swing feels completely broken. Over 420 pages of real, worked-through fixes built on 7 core fundamentals, written for a grown man with a stiff back who practices at home and just wants to strike it clean in front of his friends. Scan the QR code right there on your screen, link in the description, pinned comment. The books are all 3 in one collection. Read it, work it, and if you have not hit it solid within a week, you pay nothing. Now, back to the question that stopped me cold when I first read that page, because it is probably the same question you are asking right now. But feeling the transition is only half the picture, therefore I have to give you the other half, the piece that turned this from a decent tip into the thing that actually fixed my slice for good. This is the part I found buried deepest, and it is the piece almost no amateur understands. Because here is what modern force plate research, the same technology from that 1968 study, now refined in labs like the Titleist Performance Institute, has revealed about the very best players in the world. When scientists put tour professionals on 3-dimensional force plates and measured what their bodies do, they discovered something that looks almost like a mistake. At the transition, the best players push down into the ground. They actually get lower for a fraction of a second, a subtle squat, before they explode upward through the ball. Researchers measured these players pushing down with a force well over 1.5 times their own body weight, and then driving up off the ground through impact. You have seen this and never knew what you were looking at. That little sit-down move, that squat, is the pros loading the ground so the ground can push back and launch the club. It is Newton's third law playing out in a golf swing. You push down, the ground pushes up, and that upward force is what sends the club head rocketing through the ball. The everyday golfer does the exact opposite. We stand up too early, we come out of the shot, we throw our hands at the ball from the top, and we leak every ounce of that ground force before it ever reaches the club. So here is the full method, the thing I wish someone had handed me before I lit $4,000 on fire chasing it. It comes in 3 simple feelings, and you can groove all 3 with a broom in your living room this week. First, cock your wrists early and fully in the backswing, so the club is loaded and set before you ever get near the top. Dante called this one of his magic moves, and he was right. A late, lazy wrist set is the reason so many amateurs have nothing left to deliver at the bottom. Set them early, and hold that angle. Second, start down from the ground while the club is still finishing its trip back. That gentle press into your lead foot, the one you just practiced, begins a hair before your hands reach the top. This is the counter move, the stretch, the thing that feels impossible until suddenly it feels like the most natural thing you've ever done. Your lower body goes first, always. Third, and this is the piece the force plates revealed, let yourself sink slightly into the ground at that transition instead of standing up out of it. Feel your weight press down into both feet, your lead side especially, like you're loading a spring, and then let the ground throw you up and through the ball. Down, then up. Not up and out. Down, and then up and through. Wrists set early. Lower body starts down. Sink into the ground and let it push you back up. Those 3 feelings, layered together, are the entire downswing that costs you nothing and that nobody ever put in a display case, because there is no way to charge you for the earth pushing back against your own 2 feet. When I finally strung those 3 together, the change was not subtle. My slice, the slice that survived $4,000 of gadgets and lessons, was gone inside 3 weeks of 2-minute living room drills. Not managed, not reduced. Gone, replaced by a little draw that I still can't quite believe is coming off my club. I picked up better than 20 yards on my driver without swinging one bit harder. In fact, I was swinging easier, because I finally understood that the power was never supposed to come from my arms in the first place. It was in the ground the whole time. It was in a book from 1962. It was in a study from 1968. It was sitting there in plain sight while I kept reaching for my wallet. And that is the part that I want you to carry out of here, more than any single drill. The knowledge was never lost by accident. Joe Dante wrote it down in plain English. The Golf Society of Great Britain proved it with instruments. Teaching professionals who reached the top all learned some version of it as kids and grooved it until it was invisible. But somewhere between that knowledge and you, it got buried, not in a vault, but under an avalanche of things that were easier to sell than the truth. A new driver photographs beautifully. A push into the ground does not. So one got shouted from every billboard, and the other got whispered in a 60-year-old book most golfers will never open. Somebody kept it alive, though. Dante wrote it down. The scientists measured it. A handful of honest teachers still pass it along quietly. And now it's in your hands, in your living room, in a broom you're going to pick up tonight. You get to be the one it stops costing. You didn't just learn a golf tip today. You stopped a quiet, decades-long leak. The strokes, the confidence, the money, and the Saturdays you were losing to a secret that was never really a secret. Just a truth that nobody with something to sell wanted you to hear. You're the kind of person who would rather understand why a thing works than keep paying strangers to hide it from you. That's the whole reason you made it to the end of this, instead of clicking on the next ad for a magic driver. That instinct is worth more than any club in your bag. So here's what I want you to do for me. Go grab a broom right now, try that lead foot press into the floor, and come back and tell me in the comments, did you feel your hips start to turn on their own, without your arms doing a thing? Just right, I felt the ground start it. I read these, and I want to know the moment it clicks for you, the way it finally clicked for me on that cold October range. And if you're done losing strokes and dollars to knowledge somebody buried on purpose, subscribe and stand with the rest of us who are digging these forgotten methods back up one at a time. Because next I'm going to show you the truth about the golf ball itself. A change the manufacturers made decades ago that quietly cost every amateur distance and control, and the simple way to tell if the balls in your bag are secretly working against you. You'll never look at a sleeve of balls the same way again. Now let me tell you why that broom drill works even better than a bucket of range balls, because this part matters more than you'd think, and it's the reason my slice never came back. When you stand on the range and beat balls, your brain is fixated on one thing. Where did that ball go? That fixation is the enemy of learning a new move. The second you see a bad shot, your body panics and reaches for the old habit, the over-the-top lunge that at least gets the club to the ball somehow. You never give the new sequence a chance to sink in, because the ball is constantly judging you. That is why I could fix my swing for one bucket and lose it by the next Saturday. I was practicing in a courtroom, with every shot on trial. The living room drill removes the judge. No ball, no target, no score. Just the pure feeling of the movement, repeated slow and correct, until your nervous system files it away as normal. This is how the old teachers worked before the driving range became a business. They had their students swing in the yard, in the barn, in the parlor, grooving the motion with no ball in sight, because they understood that you build a swing in slow motion and you only test it with a ball once it's already yours. That patience got lost too, because slow practice at home doesn't sell range tokens. Do it in front of a mirror if you can, or a dark window at night. Watch that lead foot. Watch how the small press into the floor sets off the chain. Foot, hip, torso, shoulder, arm, club, like dominoes falling in the right order. When you can see that order happen in the glass, you're watching the exact thing the force plates measured in that laboratory, except your instrument is a $2 mirror and your own two eyes. And let me warn you about the one mistake that will undo all of it, because I made it for weeks. When you first feel the lower body starting down, you will be tempted to yank hard with your hips, to spin them open as fast as you can. Don't. The transition is a smooth press, not a violent jerk. Think of stepping gently onto a gas pedal, not stomping a brake. The speed comes at the very end, at the ball, when the club finally releases, not at the start. Rush the start and you throw the sequence out of order all over again, just in a new direction. Easy at the top, fast at the bottom. That is the rhythm of every great swing ever measured, and it is the opposite of what panic tells you to do. Here's another thing that took me far too long to accept. This move will feel wrong at first. It will feel like you're going to fall over toward the target. It will feel like your arms are being left behind. Good. That backward left behind feeling is your arms finally arriving on time instead of early. Every instinct you built over years of slicing was an instinct for the wrong sequence, so of course the right one feels foreign. Trust the feeling of the club dropping in behind you. Trust the ground. Give it 2 weeks before you judge it, and judge it by the ball flight, not by the comfort. Think about what this really gives back to you. Not just straighter drives, though you'll get those. It gives you the end of the apology tour on the first tee. It gives you rounds where you're still standing on the 10th tee with a real score going. It gives you the quiet satisfaction of outdriving men half your age who are swinging out of their shoes and wondering how the guy with the smooth, easy motion just flew it past them. That satisfaction is what got stolen from us, one over-the-top lunge at a time, and you're about to take it back with a broom and 2 weeks of patience. I keep coming back to that $4,000 number, because I don't want it to be your number. Everything I bought was aimed at the ball, the club, the grip, the visible, sellable end of the problem. The actual fix was aimed at the ground, the transition, the sequence, the invisible, unsellable heart of it. That gap between where the money goes and where the fix lives is not an accident. It is the business model. And the only way out of it is exactly what you did today, which is to go looking for the buried truth instead of the shiny promise. The men who wrote this down did it for us. Joe Dante, sitting there in 1962, trying to hand ordinary golfers the thing the champions knew. The scientists in Britain in 1968, wiring up swings to prove it, with numbers. They did the hard part. They dug up the truth and set it down in plain sight. All that was left was for someone to keep it from getting buried again, and that someone is you now. Every time you pick up that broom, and every time you feel the ground start your swing instead of your hands. So don't let it slip back under. Practice the 3 feelings this week. Set the wrists early. Start down from the lower body. Sink into the ground and let it launch you up and through. 2 minutes a day, no ball, no judge, just the motion. Then take it to the course and watch a slice you've fought for years simply stop showing up, because you finally fixed the one moment that was causing it all along. You came here because a thumbnail promised you a downswing secret, and I told you at the start that clicking was the right call. Now you know it was. You walked in losing strokes and dollars to something somebody buried, and you're walking out with the exact move, the exact drill, and the exact history behind it. That's not a tip, that's your game handed back to you. Grab the broom, feel the ground start it. Tell me in the comments the moment it clicks, and stick around, because the next thing they buried is sitting right in your golf bag, and once you see it, you'll wonder what else they've been counting on you never to find out. Now, before you go, let me tell you where this goes next. Inside the Old Ways Almanac, I pick up right where we stopped and walk you through the full downswing method. If something doesn't click, you ask me directly, and I answer you myself, a real person, and you won't be doing it alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen. Cancel anytime with one click, no risk. Now, if that downswing still feels stuck, there's one hidden reason your body won't turn through the ball the way it should. I'll show you how to finally free that rotation. It's starting right here.